Hi, my name is Sophie Alcorn. I'm the founder of Alcorn Immigration Law, and I'm so delighted to invite you and welcome you to today's webinar, our first of a series on the upcoming H-1B visa lottery, which happens every year, and we'll give you all the details, whether you are running HR for a company or looking to explore your own H-1B. We got you covered. Some of you might have come here through my TechCrunch column, Ask Sophie, which publishes every Wednesday. And what guides me is that we all get to live in a world where every kid that's born has a chance to self-actualize regardless of borders. And I love working with startups and in Silicon Valley and amazing, inspiring founders and technologies that are changing the world. So it's really exciting to be able to offer tools like the H-1B and other visa and green card services through Alcorn Immigration Law to support such inspired and motivated people. So welcome. And welcome to my amazing colleague, Linda Haggerty. Hi, Linda.
Hi, Sophie. Thank you for having me today.
Of course. Tell us a little bit about you so everybody can get to know you.
Sure, absolutely. So I've been practicing business immigration law for over 20 years, and I've worked with boutique law firms. I've worked with startup companies, multinational corporations, and all sorts of industries, but specializing in tech. I'm also the proud mom of two teenagers. My daughter just turned 20, my oldest, so I can't say that anymore. So that has changed, but yeah,
Wow.
But no, I agree. I'm happy to kickstart this conversation on H-1B cap season, because now that Thanksgiving has passed, like, we are really focusing on H-1B cap. It comes up quick, so we want to be prepared as early as possible.
Yeah, we're excited, everybody, to share lots of details with you today, as well as all of these late-breaking updates from the government on how they're going to try to fix and improve and change the lottery. And it's still like under development, but we'll tell you what we do know and what we don't know. And if you have any takeaway from today, I will just spoiler alert, tell you the end. If you're at a company and you know which candidates you want to put in the lottery and you want to hire us, please contact us now. Because now we have capacity to help you, and later we might not, and our fees will go up as well. And we'll go into all of that, but that's the bottom line. We would love to help you. This is our team. We have an incredible team of really brilliant lawyers and paralegals and assistants. We're a remote decentralized law firm with folks across the US. I'm in Pacific time, Linda's in Eastern, have people everywhere in between as well. And we're all super motivated, have a lot of compassion for our clients, and we all really have, skin in the game. This is super important to us on a variety of levels that we choose to do this type of work. So we're excited to get to know you and introduce you to our wonderful team. So here are some examples of who might benefit from today's webinar. Are you at a company and you're hiring people with OPT or STEM OPT, and you want to figure out how to keep them in the US and staying in their jobs and happy and able to work? Are you a company that has contractors or employees in other countries, and you would like to bring people to the US to be able to work in time zone or have a more predictable and secure working or home environment so they can be more creative? Or are you, hybrid or back in person and you need people actually in the same geography? You can use the H-1B visa to help people who have never been to the US before to come here and legally work. If you are looking as a candidate to work for a specific company, this lottery option might be good for you. It can also be beneficial if you have a workforce of people who want green cards, but they're from Canada, Mexico, Australia, Chile, or Singapore, and they're on some sort of country-specific work visa, like a TN, an E3, or an H-1B1, and you want to give them that stepping stone to a green card. The H-1B is dual intent, so it's really nice because you're allowed to seek a green card. So it can be helpful for those people. And a lot of our clients, their employment is urgent and important, and they don't yet qualify for an O1 visa for extraordinary ability. And so this is a much easier and lower threshold to qualify for. So the lottery is a great opportunity. We're able to get people H-1Bs without the lottery at any time of year through a partner program. But, it's more work and it's more money, and even people on that program end up wanting to transition through the lottery. So it can be helpful to just be in that lottery. So lots of people can benefit from the content today. And I see that some people are already putting their questions in the Q&A panel. So that's super fabulous. Thank you so much. If you do have questions now, please do what Dee and Daniela did. So thank you so much for already putting your questions in the panel. We often get a lot of these, and we have a high number of participants on today's webinar. So we'll try to answer throughout as we can. We'll try to reserve time at the end as we can. We'll try to follow up with you as needed. But the more you can front load the questions so we know how many there are, the more Linda and I can try to answer all of them. I'll just start with one of these just to set the stage. At Alcorn, we do inbound US immigration, visas, and green cards for businesses. We have an emphasis and a following, especially because of TechCrunch, in the STEM fields and technology sectors, but we have wide expertise across a variety of industries, professional services, financial, healthcare, as well as entertainment. So if your company is in another vertical, we are certainly happy to help you. And I started the firm, I think we just had our 8-year anniversary, right? So I started the firm in my kitchen 8 years ago, and I was just like trying to figure out how to help people in Silicon Valley. But I'm so thrilled by this amazing team, including Linda and everybody she's been able to bring into our firm, who just have decades of business immigration experience and are experts across the board. So startups are really hard to do immigration for in general. So everything else is super easy for us. So happy to help you if you're in other industries as well. All right. Okay, so let's dive into some H-1B basics, and we're going to cover the lottery and how it works. And if there's time, we can talk about lottery alternatives and green cards and other visa types. But the primary thing we really want to cover today is how the lottery works, how to use it, and how it might change so that you're super prepared. So, Linda, what is an H-1B?
So an H-1B is a work visa, essentially, for an individual to hold a professional position with an employer. So the H-1B sponsor is going to be the petitioning employer, and it benefits a specific beneficiary to work in a specific position.
Okay. What are the minimum requirements?
Yeah, I mean, when we look at the regulations, we're touching on some of the key requirements here. So one of the big buzzwords that we hear is specialty occupation, and it's essentially just showing that the role requires a specialized body of knowledge that the beneficiary obtained through their studies, and they need that knowledge essentially to perform the job duties. And the minimum threshold for any H-1B position is that you have to show that the job requires a minimum of a US bachelor's or equivalent. So the degree is really a cornerstone of the case. You want to make sure that degree matches the H-1B job, but we can certainly be creative when we have individuals that have a combination of education and work experience. We can get a functional work equivalency evaluation to, massage out a degree in a field that's aligned with the job.
Cool. So if the candidate is, studied biochemistry, but now they're going for a statistics degree, or if they dropped out of college but have work experience, we might be able to help them, even if their degree doesn't exactly relate.
Exactly. And like USCIS applies this formula of 3 years of work experience equals 1 year toward a bachelor's degree. Okay. So we can work those numbers out if we need to.
Okay. And so why is it good to get an H-1B visa? What does it get you?
So it essentially allows you to work in the US long term. I mean, initially it's valid for 3 years. You can extend it up to 6 years. There's exceptions if you're in the green card process and you've hit certain milestones, you can keep extending it. And it also can provide a pathway to a green card because there is dual intent within that visa category. And
That's
once you
right.
have
Just
an H1,
spouse can work too, which is beneficial.
exactly.
Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, the benefits do increase as you hit certain green card milestones.
So it's super popular because it's really good. It's like any US company can hire anybody with basically a bachelor's degree to do a job. You got to pay them a certain amount, but they can come here for years. It's okay to stay. They can bring their family, wife or husband can eventually work. So it's a pretty good deal, which is why Congress capped the number and limited the total because they didn't want the US worker population to be overrun with competition. So, okay, so what is cap exempt, cap subject? What is this lottery? What are these numbers? What are the stats?
Yeah, I mean, this is kind of the ugly part of H-1B cap, I would say. This isn't the part that we like. So essentially, there is a limited number, as Sophie said, of H-1Bs available for new filers annually. And this is regulated by the regulations. And they say essentially 65,000 new first-time H-1Bs are awarded annually, and 20,000 are allocated to those with U.S. advanced degrees. So, you know, this is a very
A
limited,
master's degree or a PhD from the US.
yes, and
But like an online degree that you did remotely, I don't think that's gonna probably cut it in most situations, right?
yeah, so they do push back. It has to be from a for-profit, not a for-profit university. You know, it has to be accredited. So there is criteria that they do apply to ensure that the degree qualifies.
Okay, and so in recent years, the demand numbers have been kind of crazy. Last year, it skyrocketed. It was like 800,000 people basically
Yeah.
entered in, and a lot of it was repeat people. There was one individual that got 83, I think 83 or 86 job offers that all those companies separately filed H-1Bs. So if you're going to game the system, you only need 5 companies to sponsor you. And then you have like a 99% chance that one of them will be selected. But the government got really upset about that. And so did, employers and small businesses. And it looked like there was a lot of legal collusion to manipulate the system. And so now we expect lower numbers this year because one of the big changes we're going to be talking about is how they're going to try to fix the lottery so that multiple companies can't put in offers for a single candidate to buy more chances. So it should get more fair. But after the government did all the deduplication over the last 6 months, the numbers ended up being that you would have about a 20-25% chance of any one person being selected overall. So it's kind of like, okay, you've got like a 1 in 4 chance of being selected, maybe a little higher if you have a master's degree or PhD from the US. So that's kind of the odds we're looking at. And then there's this start date. The earliest start date we can request is October 1st. And yeah, so somebody in the audience asked, okay, what is cap exempt? So cap subject means you're subject to the numerical cap or limit on the number of H-1Bs. So you're at like a for-profit US company. But there is also this cap exemption. What type of organizations can qualify to be cap exempt and get an unlimited number of H-1Bs without the lottery for their employees?
So it's typically going to be like a nonprofit, a research institution, government organization. They get this special status like hospitals, universities, and they don't have the limit of the H-1B cap lottery to employ people in H-1B status.
Great. So a lot of our clients use programs or you could get like a research assistantship and get a cap exempt H-1B at a university, or you could do this global talent fellowship that we do for a lot of our founder clients with Open Avenues, and you compare a cap exempt job with a cap subject job. And that's one of the ways to get an H-1B at a private company, even if they don't necessarily initially qualify for even if you don't get through the lottery. There's so much on this, but for now, let's focus on the lottery. So just fun fact, top H-1B sources, I guess Europe isn't a country, sorry for my American gross generalization, but In general, we're seeing more and more folks on H-1B come from India. Maybe fewer than this actually from China these days, but people from all over the world can qualify. And then another common misunderstanding is that it has something to do with your country of birth or your country of citizenship. And some things in immigration are affected by where you were born or what passport you hold. But actually, when we're talking about H-1Bs in the lottery, you have an equal chance regardless of what country you were born in and regardless of which passport you hold. So that's kind of helpful for people. Okay, so Linda, if you're a company and you're thinking of doing your first H-1B petition and you're wondering like, great, but what am I signing up for? What are the obligations that a US company picks up along the way by choosing to sponsor somebody through this process?
Sure. I mean, I think one of the important ones comes down to the wage and the prevailing wage. So, Department of Labor is involved in the H-1B process, and they have standards for what is the prevailing wage that the foreign national must be paid in the H-1B role, which is based on a wage survey through the Department of Labor that's geographic, it's occupational specific, wage level specific. So that's a really big part of the H-1B case. You want to make sure that the foreign national is being paid at least the prevailing wage for that role.
And just to add a comment on that, one of the reasons people hire us to do their H-1Bs for their companies is to help figure out the prevailing wage. And it's actually quite a complex legal analysis with research that we have to do based on your job description and where the person is and their wage level and blah, blah, blah. But so we can't tell you, it's nothing like, oh, it's $19 an hour. It's not like that. It depends on every candidate and every job, but that's part of what we do in this process. And, sometimes like it's some Series A tech company, maybe the wage is way higher than what was required simply due to like competition for Stanford students. But in other times it's like, oh, we have to give this person a 25-cent an hour raise to meet the prevailing wage requirement. And anyway, we'll counsel your company through that process, give you options, weigh the pros and cons, but there is going to be a prevailing wage. But I think over the last few years, most of our clients have been able to handle it pretty much okay. Okay, how about like working conditions? And that would be the LCA that gets signed. What are some of those commitments?
Yeah, I mean, so there's a labor condition application, which is a part of the H-1B petition that gets submitted to USCIS, and there's certain attestations in there that the employer has to sign off on. Essentially, that they're not adversely affecting U.S. workers. They're trying to protect U.S. workers in this whole process. They have to actually post notice of the job at the work site into locations. So there's a physical posting notice that goes up. So there are these extra steps in the process before we can file with USCIS. We've got to get approval through Department of Labor.
Okay. And then if you end up laying off the person, like last year, we saw a lot of layoffs. What are your obligations in that situation?
Yeah, I mean, so, it's interesting. I mean, there's been a huge shift since the 60-day grace period was rolled out. So now, when an H-1B worker is terminated, as long as their I-94 card is still valid, they still have time left on that petition, essentially. They can stay in the US for 60 days. They could change employers, they could change status. It just buys them time. But the old regulations still apply, where if you do terminate someone, you do have to offer them the cost of reasonable transportation home, like a one-way ticket.
Yeah. The truth is most laid off beneficiaries don't request this because they don't want to go home and they'll find
right. And it's also reasonable at cost. So it's not like one, first class to Dubai,
I would like a private jet, please. Okay, great. Yeah, that's helpful. And then the other fun fact about the H-1B grace period that kind of came out last year is you actually get to benefit from it even if you quit. So USCIS clarified that as well. It doesn't matter if you're fired, laid off, or quit, you get it. So that's kind of one good thing that came out of last year was that clarity.
Yeah.
Okay, cool. Let's now talk about the process and what's involved. So Back in the olden days, we used to print out thousands of pieces of paper and FedEx them in these packages for the lottery with physical checks. But now we have this new process. So, how's it been going for the last several years? What is this e-filing system like now?
Yeah, I mean, I have to say, this is one of the best things that they've done in a long time. I mean, it was incredibly stressful putting together a whole petition, submitting it to USCIS, and then getting it rejected, having it come back to you because they weren't selected. I mean, it was really a whole mess. So now everything is done online. So essentially, we have to create a portal, or there's a portal, and we have to set up an attorney account. There's an employer account. We register the beneficiaries in here. There's certain data we have to enter. There's a very limited window where we can do this registration. It's about 2 weeks in the middle of March. And then the lottery selections happen by April 1, and then we know, and then we can start the process of preparing applications.
Yeah, and happy to share just a little bit about our pricing in this context, because I think it's super helpful for people to have an idea of what's involved. So like if you ultimately get an H-1B through, you're going to be paying the government like probably $1,500 for a small business. Plus, if you want it done in any sort of reasonable time, you're going to use premium processing, which is $2,500. So it ends up typically being $4,000 for the government if you get selected and follow through with everything. And then we have a range of rates, but it's usually $5,000 or $6,000 depending on how established your company is. But we break that down into a sub portion for the lottery, which is usually $2,000 a candidate to put them in. And then if they get selected, we'll credit that, and you can pay the balance in spring if they get selected. It's really important to note the company has to pay. You can't like make the beneficiary pay. You can't dock their wages. The company has to take responsibility. And then we do have discounts. So if you're a company that's hiring 5 or more people, end up giving you a $2,000 discount, I think, on the 5th candidate. So that's super valuable. And then the other thing to note is we do have to charge extra fees in March. So please just do yourselves a favor, do us a favor. If you want to hire us, we're here. You can help us and help yourselves by hiring us now. So it's kind of like what's involved at a high level. And this gives you that overview of how the process really works. So there's a whole annual cycle. I feel like we're farming sometimes. But we start working with companies now. We make sure we know what you do. If your company is viable enough and legitimate to do this, make sure we have all your documents, information about the candidate, and then we hold your hand through this March, April process of the lottery, where you can create a portal and submit all your beneficiary names, and we do this handshake process. And then by April 1st, we get our electronic lottery submissions selected, and we know who can file. And then we typically have this 90-day window of April, May, and June to file the full H-1B petition for any candidates you want to move forward on. And sometimes there's multiple lottery rounds. I think there was some suspicion of that happening this year, but I don't think, did it happen this year? Did we do it again this year? I can't keep it straight.
So we did have a wait list
Okay.
around, but there's sort of like rumblings about could there be another wait list by December 1?
Like, might there
Yeah, I've heard about that a little bit too. I think if they do, it'll be a small amount. So we'll see what happens.
Okay. And there's a question from Rima about the start date. So so what year is it now? We're in 2023. So we're talking about putting people's names in the lottery in March of 2024. And then the earliest start date is going to be October 1st, 2024. And we call that fiscal year 2025 because that's how the government labels their fiscal years. So the start date is actually October 1st, 2024 that we're talking about. Okay. So what are some of the things that the candidates or beneficiaries do, that the companies do, and that we do in this process?
Yeah, so I mean, this is what we're doing right now, right? So this is what we encourage people to start to provide us, because it does take time to pull together all these documents and let us do that assessment that we need to do to make sure it's a viable case. So the candidate is going to provide us with their diplomas, transcripts, CV, immigration status documents, passport bio page. We send out a whole email launch with that. And then at the same time, we'll be working with the company to collect information and documents from them. I think one of the key things is we'll need to know who that point of contact is for this process, because they'll be in the registration portal. We'll have to have their name, title, email. And then we'll need a lot of details about the job. Because again, we're going back to this whole H-1B specialized knowledge. We want to make sure the job aligns with the candidate's qualifications. So we like to collect that information and do that assessment. So once we have those two pieces, then we can kind of take a holistic view of the whole case, ensure there's no eligibility issues, troubleshoot issues, look at the prevailing wage, and develop strategies if there are issues.
Because it's like quite a complex analysis. A lot goes into this, and we really want to make sure that we're not wasting a company's time or candidates' time, because we recognize, especially for small businesses, you have a lot riding on this. It's a risky process. It's an investment. And you also really care about your people, and for the candidates, it's somebody's life, right? So we want to make sure that everything is set up really clearly. And the more time we have, as in starting now, the more time we have opportunities to actually execute those alternative strategies that you're mentioning to salvage a setup that might not otherwise be compliant by, having time to meet with stakeholders and make any necessary changes. So.
Yeah, and I also think too, like we also are in a position where we can quickly file, right? So we've done a lot of the front end work. So come April 1, if someone's selected, we're not chasing them down for documents. We have what we need. So that's going to help.
That's something that I'm so proud of our amazing team about. I love it. It's so great. It's like, it's the beginning of June and everything's done. I'm like, what? That's amazing. So great. So great. All right. And this talks a little bit about this. So, and I sort of alluded to this. If you're selected, you're probably going to know by April 1st. Maybe some other people will find out later, but unlikely. And we have those 3 months, and we typically take 4 to 6 weeks to prepare an H-1B transfer. So, 3 months is ample time, but the sooner we're prepared, the better, the faster, the easier. And people have travel plans and life comes up. So just having a head start is super helpful to have that extra time. Plus some candidates, and we'll talk a little about students, but some of them might be on CapGap or have expiring EADs with other deadlines. So there's a lot of factors there. And here are those technical details on the filing fees. It's the $10 for the registration we just include in our 2000. The typical filing fees, depending on usually like the number of employees, is $17.10 to $24.60 for an H-1B. And then we usually recommend that premium processing for $2,500. And sometimes they turn it off, but in recent years they haven't. I think that was more of like a Trump era thing where they were just randomly suspending premium processing. But I don't think
it was bizarre. Or saying, we'll premium process it, but it's going to take us 45 days, not 15 days. Just these arbitrary rules are rolled out. So
they're just trying to mess with everybody. Which, on that note, right, like not immigrate early, immigrate often, or I don't know what the saying should be, but like whatever immigration stuff you can do while Biden is still president, like probably a good idea, because we don't know what the future holds. So, and then, were you able to see, I think that they might increase the lottery fee, right, from $10. Yeah. What's the new fee?
Maybe. Yeah, so they had some proposed increases that rolled out in January, but they're on hold. They were proposing to increase the fee to $215 per registration. So that's a big jump.
It's a big jump, but I don't really think it matters to our clients that much.
No.
Yeah, I talked to somebody in the government about it, and they're like, oh, it's really going to affect the numbers. And I'm like, really? I don't know. Like, it's really cheap. I'm like, maybe you could charge $2,000 and then have more officers employed to make green card decisions more quickly. They're like, oh no, we can't do that. Really? Anyway. I don't know about departmental budget planning for the lottery. Anyway, but on that note, they are seeking feedback and comments through December 22nd. I know we're going to include that link later, but I know we have lots of brilliant engineers on this call. And one of the things the government actually wants feedback on is like, and we'll talk about this more, but it's like, if they change the lottery to give each candidate one chance to use on a single employer, if they get selected, they have like a tracking issue of how do we give that person their approval token or something, and how do we ensure they only use it on one job. So that's a thing that they need help figuring out. But okay, and so then we talked about how during that spring Q2 window, we're going to be preparing the petition, make sure we have all the latest documents, worksite, company information, job description. There may be more about job duties. Can you explain a little bit about those tables with the percentages of job duties and how that might, need to come back more, where we really have to drill down on the percentages?
Yeah, I mean, so when we're looking at the H-1B job, we have to remember that, the job must require a minimum of a bachelor's degree in a specific field, and we have to show how the individual's education or equivalence aligns. So sometimes when we're trying to match those two things, we then also have to go to the government database of job descriptions and pull from those job descriptions, because we also have to fit the job into one of the government's boxes, like software developer, computer information systems manager, whatever it is. So it's like a three-legged chair. You've got to make sure you hit all those points and to get the case balanced. Yeah. So, I mean, I feel like we're like Santa's elves during this period, right? We're just like in our workshop, working all these cases.
I love it.
Your magic.
Yeah, we don't take vacation during this time.
No.
Let's put it that way. Wonderful. Okay, and so to that end, we do have several questions on recent graduates and F1 students and OPT and STEM OPT. So I'll try to pull some of those questions as we go through this section, but we're going to be talking about CAP gap and work permits. So how many times, how should I say this? Is there a limit to when people can be sponsored or how many chances they get? I think people wonder that sometimes.
Yeah, no, there is not a limit. And unfortunately, if you've done it 3 times, it doesn't mean you're going to have better odds this time, right? So that's the bad news. You're evaluated each year, you get a fresh chance essentially. One really good thing I would say that came out of this new registration process is you really have to show the person's qualified, but the marker has moved. So we know that there's going to be a 90-day filing period for H-1Bs that are selected, right? It'll start April 1 and it'll run to June 30th. If you have someone that's actively in, let's say, a U.S. master's program, and there's going to be a benefit to get them into the U.S. master's cap for registration, if they're earning their master's degree, as long as it's before that 90-day window closes, you can register them under the U.S. master's cap when you do the registration.
Yeah, that's awesome. And a few schools are on the quarter system instead of the semester system. So if you're like local university, if you're at Stanford and they usually graduate around June 21st, and if that's when somebody's getting their master's degree, we can work with that, but we just want to time it carefully so that we're literally mailing our petition with the final diploma or transcript or whatever showing that degree has been awarded, and we just have like a 1-week window to get the H-1B to USCIS on time, but it's doable. We definitely do that every year. Yeah. And I think like really good employers that do on-campus recruitment in the fall for folks, they're going to put people in at least 4 times, right? So when they're a student, when they're on regular OPT, when they're on their 2 years of STEM OPT, and then, I mean, if you work with us, hopefully by the end of all of that, person's either going to have an H-1B or they're going to have an O-1, or they're just going to have a green card by the time their STEM OPT is done. All of these are optional tools. You do not have to linearly progress through every thing, right? So like typical international student would be like, oh, F1 STEM degree, OPT, whatever, hope to go through the lottery. One day I'll get a perm, one day I'll get a green card. It might be in decades. But we definitely fast track that process for a lot of people. And we like to think outside of the box because there's a ton of immigration tools that, you know, if we can be creative and strategic, we can definitely speed up the timelines and makes it a lot easier and better for everybody, companies and employees included. Okay, so let's talk about CapGap. And also there's some question about how this might be improved potentially. So how does CapGap work?
Yeah, so CapGap is essentially a provision that is beneficial to F1 OPT and STEM OPT students who are essentially running out of time. So they have a valid work authorization card on the day they're on April 1, basically. So they're able to submit the registration, but they're going to be expiring before that new H-1B could be effective, which would be October 1. So this auto extension provision will extend their EAD card as long as they have an H-1B petition filed and they've been selected before the EAD expires. So sometimes when we're doing our assessment that we talked about earlier, if we see someone who's running out of STEM OPT time and they're going to expire April 10th, you know, that might be a situation where we want to prepare the H-1B petition and have it ready so that if
You
they're
see Berkeley
selected,
grads have a bunch with that date somehow. So that's an interesting, it just
yeah.
depends on the university. Yeah.
And so that, and maybe it's only in June, right? So that's often common, but we want to be able to prioritize those cases and be very aware of those deadlines. But the current rule basically says we'll give you that time, but we'll only extend it until October 1st. So even though we're not under any mandate to process that H-1B cap petition, it could take us 6 months. So you might have a gap in your employment. We're just going to give you until October 1. That forces people to do premium processing, essentially. But with the new rule, they're going to basically give you more time. So they're going to say, okay, we're going to extend that EAD card through CapGap, but now we're going to extend it until April 1, 2025.
Which is pretty nice because they're not penalizing companies for their failure to have timely adjudication periods. Because what's happened sometimes in the past is if the company isn't willing to, if nobody's willing to pay for premium processing and the H-1B is still pending and is CapGap, the person is basically stuck inside the US and unable to work and unable to leave. And they're just waiting for their H-1B to get approved. So now they can just keep working. And then as long as the government makes a decision by April 1st, you can just keep going, which is great. So
yeah,
save some money for some employers. And then talk to us about beneficiary travel restrictions if you're in CapGap.
Yeah, it's kind of a limbo status. So, you know, it's best that you stay in the US. Anytime you have a change of status, generally, there are a few exceptions. You want to stay in the US because you could abandon that application to change status. And here that could be fatal because that application to change status is what's giving you that extra work authorization time.
Okay. Let's talk a little bit about this graduation requirement. We got some questions. One is saying, somebody's first master's, their graduation will be in August. Can they qualify for the master's cap?
Unfortunately, it's unlikely. The only exception I've seen is if you've completed all your degree requirements and you have a letter from the registrar and your transcript says you've completed your requirements and you're just formally waiting for your diploma to be issued in August. Yeah. But if that's not the case, unfortunately, the hard cutoff is going to be June 30th.
Or the other thing that would be weird to wish for is like, oh, I hope I don't get selected in April and I hope there's a second lottery and I hope I get selected then so that my filing window happens after my August graduation. But it would be better to just apply. Just apply.
Yeah, that's a lot of risk. Yeah.
It's a lot of risk. It's a lot of risk. Somebody else wants to know if I mean, this is the same thing. They're asking if the master's, if you can be in progress or if you must have graduated. So the main thing is you get the extra boost in your selection chances by asserting that you will have the degree prior to the time we file the petition if you are selected. So that's typically that July 30th cutoff date.
And I just one point, so because this question seems to come up every year, the US master's or advanced degree exception applies to any degree. So I know we talk about making sure the degree that the H-1B beneficiary has aligns with the H-1B job. That is true. But some people have a bachelor's degree in an IT field, and then maybe they got a master's degree in a field that's completely unrelated.
English literature, but now they're getting an IT job.
Yeah. So they can actually use that US master's, even though it's unrelated, to qualify them for the master's cap. So, you know,
insane. Or if you went to law school after your CS degree and then you're like, I don't want to be a lawyer, forget this.
right.
Awesome. Yeah, that's a great reminder. Thank you. Okay, and then this also ties in a little bit into the broader discussion of how we file and when you travel. So we've alluded to this, but what's a change of status?
Yeah, a change of status is when you are in the US in a valid non-immigrant status. So oftentimes that's going to be F1 OPT or STEM OPT. And when you file the H-1B cap petition, you're asking USCIS to change your status from F1 OPT or STEM OPT to H-1B. And when the approval notice is issued, it will actually have a new I-94 card attached to it, which shows that your stay has been extended and your status has been changed.
And then what is consular processing?
So consular processing is when you don't want your status to be changed, by USCIS. You want to have more control over when you make that H-1B effective. So that's going to require you to travel. Generally, it's going to be best to go to your home country. So after the once the H-1B is approved, you can apply, I think up to 90 days before the approval, you can apply for the visa stamp, for H-1B visa stamp, but you can't enter the US until 10 days before October 1 to make that H-1B effective.
So this always has fads with students in online chat groups every year wanting different things. So I remember one year where all these students were severely offended if they were from China or India that we didn't suggest automatic consular processing if their H-1B was selected in the lottery on their first year of OPT, because they were saying, I don't want to activate my H-1B yet. I want to hold it for later. I want to use up all my OPT and STEM OPT and then go on to my H-1B. And that gives my employer more time to meet their own internal requirements for when they're going to start perm and the green card for me. But I still think, especially post-COVID, but even now, I get that that's a strategy for people to try to game the system and have more time, but I feel like that's also risky.
Yeah, I mean, what we hate to happen is, let's say you don't make, you say an F1 OPT status, it drags on for 6 months, you're not able to go home and travel, and you lose your job. And you've never made that H-1B change of status effective. So then you're in a difficult position where you may not be able to get an H-1B in the future. I mean, we've had some exceptions and some success here, but there's the risk that if you've never activated that H-1B, then you might not be able to apply for an H-1B transfer and use that lottery number.
Yeah. Okay. Great. And then, and then we don't know, if there could be administrative processing, there can be delays in visa appointments, there can be a global pandemic. You thought you were going for a week, you're out for, 11 months. Huge victory today. This AI founder that maybe had that situation. They got their whole EB-1A from start to finish, including the I-140 and the I-485. Approved yesterday, all within 6 months of starting the EB-1A. Incredible. And this is somebody who 5 years ago was like, there's never going to be a chance that I could qualify, but we worked together through all of our Alcorn programs and everything, and step by step. So such a victory, but you never know. If life is not certain, right? I think that's probably the lesson of our age. So you really want to be deliberate and consider everything before you make a move. So always talk to us, always talk to your school. If your beneficiary wants to travel, this might be a situation where the wedding in Cabo might not be worth it this summer or something. But we're happy to have those conversations with you. And also keep in mind, if you do a change of status and then you need to travel, you can always apply for a visa interview later to get that H-1B foil stamped in your passport as your visa. And then the other really cool change that we're hoping for, and there's just a Bloomberg article about this like an hour ago, but they're saying they're actually going to launch that stateside visa stamping for H-1Bs in January, starting with 20,000 H-1Bs as their pilot program that they've been talking about for a year. So that would be so amazing, because it means you don't have to go to India or Canada or Mexico or, you know, some random Caribbean nation to attempt to get a visa in your passport to be able to travel internationally. So that'll be great. Okay, and with that, let's talk a little bit more about these the new H-1B modernization rule. And this is something that we got a question about in the Q&A panel, and it has to do with how it's looking now for founders to get H-1Bs. And I am so excited about this. So basically, for purposes of this lottery, the new thing that's possible is if you're like in a foreign country and you're a founder and you did your Stripe Atlas Delaware Corporation and you don't qualify for an O1 yet, but you want to see if you can get to the States next year, your company can put you in this H-1B lottery for your first visa. We'll put you through the process. We need the LCA, we need the offer letter, but you no longer need to give up half of your company to some like random American person to be on your board. So much better. I've seen such crazy things over the years because in this H-1B modernization rule, the government literally included like 3 pages answering the questions I've been asking them for years of like, how do we prove employer-employee relationship? Do we have to show ability to hire, fire, and supervise? And they're like, it's cool. All you need is an LCA and offer letter. And we're like, okay, we got this. So no more diluting founder equity below 50%, no more finding a 3-member board prematurely. And this works for the lottery as well. The other thing that we don't know if it'll come through, but this is in the question, they may limit the time for founder H-1Bs to be 18 months, but that would literally require a new regulation. We haven't seen that text actually come out yet. So I don't know. And they're also going to make it easier in this rule for more nonprofits to have more exemptions for cap exempt non-lottery H-1Bs. So that'll be really cool. So that's great for founders, but let's now turn our attention to another question we got from the audience, which was right on track, which was, what have you heard on the lottery fraud conversation? Is it likely that the government will crack down on fraudulent multiple applications? And if so, when? And I mean, I would say very carefully, like having multiple applications is not completely illegal. So, yeah. But it's disfavored because it's unfair for American businesses and for international students. So what are these other changes that they might do to make the lottery more fair?
Yeah, I mean, I think we've touched on them. So this is really just kind of going back to that cap gap where you're getting more cap gap time. Essentially, they'll run it until the April 1 of the next year. So that's really the first 2 bullets cover that. And then the second is what you're talking about. You know, you can apply 60 times in the lottery registrations, but you're just going to get 1 selection chance. And I think I'm still just baffled on how they're actually going to do that. It'll be really interesting to see how the system will accommodate that, because right now it's really the employer's portal where all the information flows through. So that'll be a big change.
Yeah, they're going to need an entirely new software system, and I don't know if they can build and launch that at scale and get the regulation through. So it might just be that they announce, hey, we're going to build this for 2025, and then they use the rest of this administration's resources to build it, so the next administration just uses it. That could be.
Yeah, or we get selections and we'll have a note like this beneficiary was selected, but they have multiple registrations, right? So we know they were selected, and then there's a note that there are multiple selections. So that beneficiary then has to, I don't know. It's kind of, that's the part that worries me about them implementing it. I think it's going to curtail people from doing multiple registrations, even if they don't roll it out, because now that there's scrutiny, it's really important that you have bona fide job offer. And it is possible that you have 2 job offers. As long as it's a bona fide situation, then I would, say it's okay. But I think that we'll probably see less of that regardless of whether they have time to roll it out.
And if you have some brilliant idea for how they can do this, Alex, I would request that you take this public comment link from the slide and pop it into the webinar chat window, please. And that's where you can submit your comments until December 22nd. So they really need help with that. And they specifically requested ideas for how to run this. And just on this note, I mean, the current status of, is it possible to have multiple applications in the lottery and how? I mean, technically, yes. Basically, one company can only sponsor one candidate once, but one candidate can get multiple real job offers from different companies, and all of those separate companies could sponsor that same person for different jobs. So that's technically legal now still, but that's what they're trying to curtail, so that even if you do that, it wouldn't matter because you only get one chance as a human. And it would just make it more fair for like the million international students in the US and also all the small businesses. All right, so I see more questions, which are awesome. We're gonna have some time to go through those, a few minutes at least, so that's great. But just to tell you, we are now accepting clients first come, first serve. We have run out of capacity and in prior years, and we've literally had to turn people away at the last minute, which makes me really sad because we would like to be able to help the world and also to change the system and make it better for everybody. But yeah, we walk you through the whole thing, the pre-registration, the lottery, the post-selection. So we're gonna get in the weeds and do everything that's necessary so that you have peace of mind as a HR person at a company, and for all your candidates who you care about, that we're gonna make sure everything checks out, it's viable, we troubleshoot any issues early, we're gonna make sure the electronic process works for you. I mean, that was something I was so proud of our team and you for, Linda, this year, is we got all of our electronic submissions in like within the first 2 days. And then that, like on day 3 or day 4, the website crashed and everybody was freaking out, but ours were done already. So that was really amazing.
Yeah, last minute is not a good plan.
Yeah. So start now. We'd love to work with you. Okay, and so we're going to go into the Q&A. I'm also going to have our contact information here for you. I wrote a book. It's a bestseller. It's called Ask Sophie, the Founder's Guide to Visas and Green Cards. So the lottery is discussed in there. The book is sort of a choose your own adventure guide for founders to navigate US immigration, but it also talks about sponsoring employees at scaling tech companies and other types of businesses. So it's like $9 on Amazon. You can get the Kindle. And Alex has now put the DHS comment link in the chat window, and she'll also be including the links to get the book on Amazon. And also what the QR code is for is to simply contact us and schedule an appointment. So we encourage you to do so. And I'll leave this slide up as we go through the questions in the few minutes we have. Okay, so I'm gonna maybe do this super rapid fire. Are companies allowed to state in their job postings that they sponsor H-1B visas? Yes, they are. Most companies don't specifically offer it because they don't want to open up the floodgates. It is possible that they sponsor visas, but they just don't advertise it. Next question. Seems that there is an H-1B for entrepreneurs too, so people can be self-nominated. What's the cost? Yeah, I mean, so that's that new guidance that made it clear that if you have a real US company and you're going to go on payroll as a founder, you can be sponsored for an H-1B by your company. It's similar fees for usually $4,000 with premium processing when all is said and done. And for a founder, early stage startup, and some other variables, our legal fee is $6,250 flat fee to prepare and file a founder H-1B. Is it feasible to pursue the EB-2 from outside the US as an alternative to the lottery? It's feasible, but the timelines don't make sense. An EB2 green card is likely going to be a 2 to 4 year process from outside the United States, whereas the H-1B lottery happens annually. So usually based on timing, people want an H-1B or an O-1 first. How one can get an employer who can sponsor the H-1B with a degree not from the US. I mean, you, as a candidate, you have to just look for jobs and negotiate with the employer to put you in the lottery, but it's legally viable for sure. Does your H-1B job have to be strictly related or relevant to your F1 major? No, but we have to be able to show other education or experience to show that you're qualified in that field. And then when can we initiate an H-1B cap exempt transfer in the year, and how long will it typically take? Cap exempt transfer.
I think it's like a portable H, right? Like you're changing employers once you have.
I mean, once people have gotten an H-1B approved at one company through the lottery, they can transfer it to a future job. You're not like locked in. Okay, gonna keep going. I'm a master's student in the US. When is the first time I would play the H-1B lottery? Whenever you have an employer that's willing to sponsor you, just based on your bachelor's degree. Do I get an extra lottery if I get a job offer early? I mean, the lottery is once a year, so whenever a company is willing to sponsor you, you should do it. If I get selected in the lottery, do I have to move from H-1B to STEM OPT in the year itself in October? Can I defer it and stay in STEM? We talked about this a little bit. We don't recommend deferring. It is technically possible, but it's risky. Are research foundations like the Cystic Fibrosis Foundation cap exempt? Potentially. I don't know them off the top of my head, but we're happy to take a look. So yeah, I'd love to help. Do you have to stay with the employer that sponsors you for the full 3 years? No, you can transfer at any time. It's at-will employment. It's not contract employment in the United States. Can you talk about the H-1B transfer once you have time, the process timeline and documentations? You need an offer. We can do it any time of year. It typically takes 4 to 6 weeks. If you're in valid H-1B status, you can start at the new company once USCIS has received the new petition. If you got laid off, you have 60 days. We have to be careful about the timeline. Please have your employer who is offering you the job contact us and we can give them all the details. Oh my God, 10 left and we're at time. Okay, I'm going to stay a few minutes longer. Linda, do you need to drop off?
I do. I have to jump onto another call, but
Great. Take care of our clients. Thank you so much.
thanks so much. Take care. Bye.
Is there a limit on how much equity you can have in your employer? Not anymore. Can an H-1B holder have more than 20% equity of the company? Now the answer is yes. If I file the petition with a previous master's degree, do I have to wait until October 1st, 2024 to start working? Yes, that's the earliest start date for a lottery H-1B for this cycle. Is there any correlation between the chances to win the H-1B lottery and your country of citizenship? No. What if I get laid off after I get selected from the lottery? You have a 60-day grace period. Can I change to a new employer after my H-1B gets approved? Yes. What's the eligibility for the startup company? You need to be incorporated. You need to have some sort of runway in the bank or some traction and revenue from selling something. And you need to be able to show that the company can afford the prevailing wage salary for the duration of the petition that we're requesting for the 3 years. And is it an early stage company without a lot of funding eligible? Absolutely, yes. We've gotten it for the first employee of many, many companies. Is a founder's H-1B petition subject to the lottery? Usually, yes, unless we do that Open Avenues cap exempt program that a lot of our clients end up using if they can't qualify for an O-1 and they don't want to wait for the randomness of the lottery. What happens if an employee voluntarily leaves the employer after 1 year, for example? The company has to notify the government that the person is no longer in H-1B status. Are they given 60 days to find a new job? Yes. Do they have to go home? Not if they find a new job or change their status. What does the employer have to do? Either buy the return ticket home if the person wants for a reasonable price, but also notify the government that they're no longer working there. Or is there any updates to the H-1B for people studying AI? Not yet. The president signed that executive order, but we haven't seen any of the new regulations come through from that yet. How long does it take to transfer the H-1B? Typically 4 to 6 weeks. Some people prefer to wait for an approval until they give notice at their current company, but it just depends. We can work with you on that. If I obtain an H-1B, but I want to change my job, what should I do to keep my H-1B? Do I need to apply for the lottery again? Once you've gone through the H-1B, then if you want a new job, your new employer has to petition to transfer your H-1B to the new company. And once that gets approved, you're allowed to go work there instead. Once you get the H-1B, you never have to go into the lottery again. No, not necessarily. If you never get sponsored for a green card and you use your 6 years, then you have to go home for a year and then you can go through the lottery again. But usually people start the green card process either through a company or through self-petition, and then they don't have to go through the lottery again and they get longer H-1B extensions. Can I transfer my H-1B to a new employer before October 1st? No, we recommend, well, I've done it. I've done it for somebody who chose consular processing, never activated it. We argued, but it got approved. But it's super risky. So we typically recommend, if you're in that position, to like at least work the month of October. If I'm on STEM OPT extension and I have a company and I hire people and I don't work there personally, is it legal to do that? Yeah, business owners don't have to work at their companies. That is totally fine. All right. Oh my God, we did it, everybody. I answered 35 of your questions. Thank you so much. Oh, one more. How quickly can an employer begin the green card process after being selected in the lottery? Immediately, and we have several employers start the green card process before the lottery. So that is an option too. Cool. Well, thank you so much, everybody. It was so great hanging out with you. Thanks for attending. Thanks for staying with me. So many of you stayed with me the whole time. That's awesome. Keep in touch. Happy to meet with you. We'll be reaching out with materials, recordings, information, next steps. We'd love to support you. And I hope you have a wonderful and amazing and fabulous day. Thank you, everybody. Bye.